High school reunion explodes. Secrets, love triangle, and chaos. How one woman's quiet courage prevented complete disaster. The email arrived on a rainy Thursday evening, tucked between work spam and an online store promotion. At first, I almost deleted it without reading, but then the subject line caught my eye. Lincoln High, class of 2013 reunion. I froze. My cursor hovered over it like the message itself might burn me. 10 years. 10 years since those hallways, the lockers plastered with stickers, the cafeteria that always smelled like burnt pizza, the endless chatter about college applications and prom dates. 10 years since the friendships, the betrayals, and the secrets I swore I'd bury that I clicked it open, my heart racing faster than it should for something so simple. The email was formal but enthusiastic. Come reconnect, relive the memories, and see how far we've come. It included the date, the venue, the old community center near the football field, and even a link to RSVP. I laughed bitterly. See how far we've come, huh? I knew at least a handful of us hadn't come very far at all. And as much as I wanted to pretend I didn't care, the truth was ugly. Part of me wanted to know, to see them, to see him, and her, because there were three people I couldn't stop thinking about. First, Daniel, my former best friend, once closer than a brother. We'd shared everything until something snapped between us senior year, something I still couldn't say out loud without feeling my throat tighten. He went from confidant to stranger overnight, and I never got closure. Then, Melissa, my high school crush, the one person who made my heart pound in a way I tried to hide behind sarcasm and fake indifference. She never knew. At least, I don't think she did. She had her own life, her own relationships, but I carried that quiet ache through college and beyond. And finally, Jordan, the golden child of our year, the one who seemed untouchable, popular, charming, and, as I would later find out, ruthless when it came to protecting his image. He wasn't my friend, but he was inextricably tied to everything that broke senior year. My chest tightened as I read through the invite again. I could almost hear the echoes of that last day of school, the shouting, the tears, the whispers that spread like wildfire. That chapter of my life had never fully closed that I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The rational part of me said, don't go. What's the point? But another part, the one that still replayed old conversations at 3 a.m., the one that wondered if Melissa ever thought about me, the one that still felt the sting of Daniel's silence, that part screamed, you have to be by the time the rain outside slowed to a drizzle. I had already clicked RSVP. Yes, I'll attend. And just like that, the ghosts of high school were invited back into my life. The weeks leading up to the reunion felt like walking with a pebble in my shoe, uncomfortable, distracting, and impossible to ignore. Every time I tried to push it out of my mind, something would remind me. An old song on the radio, a Facebook memory, a text from a number I hadn't seen in years. The reunion had created ripples, pulling people back into orbit, even those who hadn't spoken in a decade. Suddenly, group chats sprang back to life. My phone buzzed with messages from classmates I barely remembered. Some were casual, you going? Others carried that unmistakable tone of gossip. Did you hear who's back in town? I ignored most of them, but the one that made my stomach twist came from Daniel. His name lit up my screen late one night. At first, I thought it was a mistake. We hadn't spoken since graduation, since that day. My thumb hovered over the notification, and my pulse thudded in my ears. Finally, I opened it. Heard you're going. Guess I'll see you there. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a casual message, as if 10 years of silence were nothing. I stared at it for a long time, fighting the urge to type back. My fingers moved over the keyboard. Yeah, see you. Then deleted it. Retyped. Looking forward to it. Deleted again. In the end, I left it on read, but the damage was done. Memories came flooding back. The late nights we spent cramming for exams, the inside jokes that no one else understood, the way he used to have my back no matter what. And then, the betrayal. The words he said that cut so deep, I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. I told myself I didn't care anymore. But the truth? I did. I cared too much. Meanwhile, Melissa's presence was harder to ignore than ever. She posted about the reunion on Instagram, a boomerang video of her trying on a dress, captioned, "Can't believe it's been 10 years. My heart lurched when I saw it. She looked older, yes, but also exactly the same. The same smile that once made me forget how to breathe that I scrolled through the comments. Dozens of heart emojis, compliments, and one particular comment from Jordan, always the star. Of course, Jordan was always there, circling her like a hawk. Back then, it had been subtle. The way he put his arm around her shoulders, the way he whispered things that made her laugh. I never stood a chance against him. And maybe I still didn't. The thought of seeing them together again, side by side, sent a cold shiver down my spine. But what unsettled me more was the possibility that nothing had changed. That Melissa still saw me as just a friend from math class. That Daniel still thought he was justified. That Jordan still played his games without consequence. The week before the reunion, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying scenarios. What I'd say to Daniel, whether Melissa would even notice me, whether Jordan would smirk that same infuriating smirk. I even dreamed about it. Surreal, feverish dreams where the gymnasium lights flickered, voices blurred into shouting, and secrets spilled out in the open that I started rehearsing conversations in my head. Polite, distant, or maybe cold, cutting. Or maybe I'd just drink enough to numb the awkwardness and coast through the evening. But no matter how many versions I played, they all ended the same. With something breaking down on the day of the reunion, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I'd admit to anyone. The suit wasn't new, but it was the best I had. I adjusted the tie 3 times before finally giving up and yanking it off. My reflection stared back at me, half nervous, half defiant. This wasn't just a night of nostalgia. It was a collision course, and deep down, I knew. Old wounds don't stay buried forever. The night of the reunion buzzed with the kind of nervous anticipation you could feel in your bones. The venue wasn't the old high school gym, thank God, but a rented banquet hall downtown. The kind of place that tried to look fancy with dim lighting, cheap champagne, and gold tablecloths. The marquee outside spelled it out in bold letters. Class of 2015 reunion. As soon as I pulled into the parking lot, I felt my chest tighten. Rows of cars lined the entrance, and I recognized a few license plates. People had driven back from out of state, some flying in, just to relive their glory days or prove they'd made something of themselves. My hand stayed on the steering wheel long after I parked, knuckles pale. For a moment, I considered turning around, just leaving, pretending something came up. But then I pictured Melissa's smile, Daniel's smug text, Jordan's inevitable smirk, and something inside me hardened. No, I had to face this that I stepped inside. The air was heavy with perfume, cologne, and the faint tang of alcohol. Laughter echoed off the walls, mingling with the beat of music that was just loud enough to remind us of high school dances. Balloons bobbed in the corners, and a slideshow of old yearbook photos played on a projector. Awkward braces, bad haircuts, the cliques we thought would matter forever. The crowd was already buzzing. Groups clustered at cocktail tables, some people hugging like long-lost siblings, others shaking hands stiffly as if they'd only been co-workers. The years had been kind to some, unkind to others. A few looked almost exactly the same. A few I wouldn't have recognized if not for the name tags. Then I saw him. Daniel, he was leaning against the bar, laughing with 2 guys from our old soccer team. His hair was shorter now, styled, but that smile, too confident, too sharp, hadn't changed. He looked successful, the kind of man who'd never lost a night of sleep over what he did. My stomach twisted, our eyes met. Just for a second, his grin faltered, and for a brief moment, something flickered there, discomfort, regret, but then it was gone, replaced with that same practiced charm. He raised his glass slightly, like a silent toast that I turned away, but then, Melissa, she walked in like time hadn't touched her. Not because she hadn't changed, she had. Her hair was shorter, softer. Her style more elegant than the girl I remembered from senior prom. But there was something about the way the room seemed to shift when she entered, as if everyone noticed her at once. My breath caught in my throat. She smiled at someone across the room, and then her eyes landed on me. It wasn't long. Just a second, but it was enough. A flicker of recognition, a softening around her mouth, like she wasn't sure whether to smile or look away. My heart hammered so hard I thought people around me could hear it. And then Jordan appeared, of course. He slid in behind her, one hand on her back, steering her through the crowd like he owned the place, like he owned her. He hadn't changed much. Taller maybe, broader shoulders, the same self-assured posture. He looked like someone who'd spent 10 years climbing ladders and stepping on anyone in his way. the three of them. All here, Daniel at the bar, Melissa in the center of the room, Jordan right beside her. That it was like the universe had conspired to drag every unresolved thread of my past into one suffocating space. And I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that tonight wasn't going to be polite small talk and reminiscing. This was going to unravel. The reunion had barely been underway for 20 minutes before the inevitable happened. I'd been lingering near the edge of the room, sipping watered-down champagne and trying to look casual, when the crowd shifted and Melissa broke away from Jordan's orbit. She was walking toward me. Her smile was polite, almost rehearsed, but her eyes told another story, something unsteady, almost vulnerable. I swallowed hard, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Wow," she said, stopping just a few feet away. "I didn't think you'd actually come." Her voice was softer than I remembered, but still carried that same lilt that used to undo me in high school. "Yeah, well," I managed, "thought it was time to face the ghosts." Melissa's lips curved into something halfway between a smirk and a wince. "There are plenty of those here." Before I could reply, a shadow fell across us. "Jordan." "Melissa," he said smoothly, sliding an arm around her waist like a claim. His eyes flicked to me, sharp and assessing. "Didn't realize you two had catching up to do." I could feel the tension tighten between us like a rope. "We were just saying hi," Melissa replied quickly, her voice a little too light. Jordan's gaze lingered on me, unblinking. "Right? Just hi." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Don't forget this isn't high school anymore." It was a warning, thinly disguised as small talk. My jaw tightened, but I forced a smile. "Trust me, I remember." Melissa shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us, then said, "I'm going to grab a drink." She slipped out of his hold and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me and Jordan standing there, the air crackling with unspoken history. Jordan didn't waste a second. "Listen," he said, stepping closer. "Whatever you think tonight is, it's not. Melissa and we've built a life. She doesn't need reminders of old mistakes." I let out a humorless laugh. "Funny, you sound more worried about yourself than her." His eyes narrowed, the charming facade slipping just enough to reveal the steel underneath. "Careful, you don't want to start something you can't finish." Before I could answer, another voice cut in. Well, look who's here." Daniel. Of course. He'd appeared at my side with a drink in hand, wearing that infuriating grin. "Didn't expect you to show up," he said, his tone dripping with mock surprise. "Guess nostalgia got the better of you, huh?" Jordan's expression darkened, clearly annoyed at the intrusion. "Perfect timing," he muttered. Daniel raised his glass in a mock toast. "Reunions are all about digging up the past, aren't they? Some of us have more dirt than others." His eyes flicked deliberately between me and Jordan. My fists clenched at my sides. Daniel was always like this, a spark tossed into dry grass. And the worst part? He enjoyed watching things burn. "Careful, Dan," I said evenly, forcing the words out. "Some of us don't find it as funny as you do." He just laughed, taking a slow sip of his drink, unbothered in that moment. Standing there with Jordan's glare on one side and Daniel's smirk on the other, I realized this wasn't a coincidence. The three of us had been circling each other for years. And tonight, finally, everything was going to collide. The evening wore on, and while the music kept up its cheerful beat, the undercurrent between us four was anything but light. Every time I caught Melissa's eyes, there was a flicker there, recognition, regret. Something she quickly hid whenever Jordan stepped closer. But it didn't take long for the past to break through the surface. It happened near the photo slideshow, where a group had gathered to laugh at our ridiculous hairstyles. One slide froze on the screen, prom night. Melissa in a pale blue dress, me in a rented tux, my arm around her waist. And just out of frame, Jordan, glaring. The laughter around us quieted a little, replaced by curious glances. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Jordan's jaw tightened. And Daniel, of course, saw the perfect opportunity. "Ah," Daniel said loudly, smirking. "The golden couple. Funny how history rewrites itself, huh?" The group murmured, some chuckled awkwardly. And I felt the weight of a dozen eyes on us. "Don't," Melissa whispered sharply. But Daniel only raised his eyebrows, enjoying himself. Jordan stepped forward, his voice low but edged with steel. "Careful, Dan." But Daniel ignored him and turned to me instead. "Tell me, do you ever think about that night? The way it all blew up? How one choice ruined. What was it? Friendships, reputations, maybe even futures. Melissa's face paled. Jordan's fists clenched, and suddenly, I was back there, senior year. Prom night wasn't just awkward. It was the night secrets spilled. Melissa had confessed, in tears, that she'd been seeing Jordan behind my back for weeks. Daniel, drunk and bitter, had broadcasted across the dance floor. The betrayal, the humiliation, the way everyone turned to watch me crumble, it had seared itself into my memory, and now, 10 years later, here we were. The wound ripped open again. I remember enough, I said finally, my voice rough. Enough to know some scars never fade. Melissa flinched, her eyes dropping to the floor. Jordan stepped closer, his presence like a shield and a threat all at once. That's ancient history, he snapped. No point digging it up. But Daniel laughed. Ancient history has a way of haunting the present, don't you think? He glanced at Melissa, his grin sharp. Especially when it's unfinished business. Melissa turned on him then, her voice shaking but firm. Enough, Daniel. The crowd was restless now, sensing the tension, whispering behind hands. What was supposed to be a night of nostalgia had shifted into something heavier, darker. And I realized, none of us had really moved on. Not from each other. Not from that night. The ghosts of high school weren't just back. They were alive, breathing, and demanding to be heard. Once the tension broke open, there was no way to put it back in the box. The slideshow kept rolling, but hardly anyone was watching anymore. Instead, whispers rippled through the room like static. A cluster of old classmates near the punch table leaned toward each other, eyes flicking in our direction. A few phones appeared, screens glowing as texts and posts flew faster than I could track. Did you hear that? Prom drama, 10 years later. Melissa and him? But she's with Jordan now. Wait, wasn't Daniel involved too? The fragments floated to me as I passed by, each word a little dagger twisting deeper. Melissa tugged at my arm. Please, let's just step outside. People are staring. But it was too late for damage control. Near the buffet, two women from our old cheer squad were laughing. Sharp, cruel laughter, the kind that travels. God, it's like nothing's changed. Same love triangle, same mess. Guess high school never really ends. Jordan's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. Shut your mouths. That only fueled it. Someone muttered. Touchy, huh? Another voice added. Man's insecure for a reason. And Daniel, of course Daniel, decided to stoke the flames. He raised his glass and called out, loud enough for half the hall to hear, to memories. The ones that never die, no matter how much some people wish they would. The crowd chuckled, some nervously, some with genuine amusement. My stomach churned up. Melissa's face was flushed crimson, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. Jordan stepped in front of her, practically vibrating with rage. You think this is funny? He barked at Daniel. But it wasn't just Daniel anymore. A former teammate of Jordan's, drunk, loud, emboldened, chimed in. Oh, come on, man, lighten up. Everyone knew back then. Half the school thought Melissa was juggling you both anyway. The air snapped like a live wire. Melissa's breath caught audibly, her shoulders trembling. That I wanted to intervene, to pull her out, to shield her, but I was frozen. It felt like the entire gym had turned into an arena. The guests no longer classmates, but spectators at some twisted gladiator match. Every word, every glare, every twitch of muscle was being devoured, judged, dissected. Then came the final push. Someone at the bar, I couldn't even see who, shouted. Tell the truth. Who was she with first? The hall erupted with laughter, groans, claps, jeers. People egging us on like we were performers in a play they'd paid to see. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. Jordan was ready to swing. Daniel was basking in the chaos, feeding off it like oxygen. And me? I felt the ground slipping, the past swallowing us whole, dragging every ugly memory into the present. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was a wildfire, and there was no telling who'd burned before it burned out. Once the tension broke open, there was no way to put it back in the box. The slideshow kept rolling, but hardly anyone was watching anymore. Instead, whispers rippled through the room like static. A cluster of old classmates near the punch table leaned toward each other, eyes flicking in our direction. A few phones appeared, screens glowing as texts and posts flew faster than I could track. Did you hear that? Prom drama, 10 years later. Melissa and him? But she's with Jordan now. Wait, wasn't Daniel involved too? The fragments floated to me as I passed by, each word a little dagger twisting deeper. Melissa tugged at my arm. Please, let's just step outside. People are staring. But it was too late for damage control. Near the buffet, two women from our old cheer squad were laughing. Sharp, cruel laughter, the kind that travels. God, it's like nothing's changed. Same love triangle, same mess. Guess high school never really ends. Jordan's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. Shut your mouths. That only fueled it. Someone muttered, touchy, huh? Another voice added, man's insecure for a reason. And Daniel, of course Daniel, decided to stoke the flames. He raised his glass and called out, loud enough for half the hall to hear, to memories. The ones that never die, no matter how much some people wish they would. The crowd chuckled, some nervously, some with genuine amusement. My stomach churned up. Melissa's face was flushed crimson, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. Jordan stepped in front of her, practically vibrating with rage. You think this is funny? He barked at Daniel. But it wasn't just Daniel anymore. A former teammate of Jordan's, drunk, loud, emboldened, chimed in. Oh, come on, man, lighten up. Everyone knew back then. Half the school thought Melissa was juggling you both anyway. The air snapped like a live wire. Melissa's breath caught audibly, her shoulders trembling. That I wanted to intervene, to pull her out, to shield her, but I was frozen. It felt like the entire gym had turned into an arena. The guests no longer classmates, but spectators at some twisted gladiator match. Every word, every glare, every twitch of muscle was being devoured, judged, dissected. Then came the final push. Someone at the bar, I couldn't even see who, shouted, tell the truth. Who was she with first? The hall erupted with laughter, groans, claps, jeers. People egging us on like we were performers in a play they'd paid to see. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. Jordan was ready to swing. Daniel was basking in the chaos, feeding off it like oxygen. And me? I felt the ground slipping, the past swallowing us whole, dragging every ugly memory into the present. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was a wildfire, and there was no telling who'd burned before it burned out. The moment the crowd started chanting, I knew there was no turning back. The gym, decorated with fairy lights and nostalgic banners, felt less like a reunion and more like a pressure cooker seconds from exploding. Melissa's voice trembled as she whispered, please, let's go. But Jordan was already locked onto Daniel. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned bone white. Daniel, smug and steady, tilted his head with a grin. Why don't you tell them, Jordan? Why don't you tell everyone how it really went down? The crowd leaned in, hungry. Enough, Jordan roared. His voice echoed off the walls, rattling the decorations. A few people actually stepped back, startled. Melissa flinched, clutching her purse like a shield, but Daniel wasn't backing down. He spread his arms theatrically, as if the attention was his rightful crown. What's the matter? Afraid the truth will make you look pathetic? Everyone knows you were second choice. The words hit Jordan like a slap. He surged forward, shoving Daniel hard enough that his drink spilled across the floor. Gasps erupted. Phones shot up, recording. Jordan! Melissa cried, grabbing his arm, but it was useless. The dam had cracked. Daniel stumbled, then laughed, actually laughed. There he is. The insecure little boy who could never stand that she wanted me first. Before anyone could stop it, Jordan swung. A solid punch landed against Daniel's jaw with a sickening crack. The room exploded. Shouts, screams, cheers. The gym was chaos. Some rushed forward to break it up, others egged it on. Melissa was shoved to the side, nearly falling as she tried to wedge herself between them. Stop it, she cried, her voice raw. I finally snapped out of my paralysis and lunged in, grabbing Jordan's shoulders, trying to pull him back. Enough, man. You'll ruin everything. But Daniel, fueled by humiliation, struck back, tackling Jordan to the floor. Chairs toppled. Glass shattered. A table of snacks went flying. The chant of the crowd turned ugly. Fight. 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 And as I struggled to separate them, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't about Melissa anymore. This was about pride, old grudges, and the kind of resentment that festers for a decade. Melissa's sobs cut through the noise. Please stop, both of you. But her voice was lost in the roar. The reunion was no longer a celebration. It had become a battlefield, and every single person in that gym was either a fighter, a spectator, or collateral damage. And the night was far from over. The fight was broken up eventually, not by reason, but by force. A group of ex-football players and a couple of braver classmates pried Jordan and Daniel apart, dragging them to opposite ends of the gym like caged animals being pulled back before they tore each other apart completely. But the damage was already done. Melissa stood in the middle of it all, her makeup smudged, her breathing uneven, staring at the chaos as though she had just woken up in a nightmare. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her out, but everywhere I turned, people were shouting, debating, choosing point. One guy from Jordan's old team raised his voice. Jordan was right. Daniel's always been a snake, stirring trouble since day one. A chorus of agreement rose from that corner, classmates nodding, some clapping Jordan on the back like he had just defended honor itself. On the other side, Daniel leaned against the bar, blood trickling from his lip, but his smirk still firmly in place. He raised his glass. Someone had poured him another, and sneered. At least I don't hide behind fake respectability. Jordan's always been a fraud. Melissa wanted me. Everyone knows it. That sparked cheers from another group, the ones who had always loved drama, who thrived on chaos. They laughed, shouted insults at Jordan, and some even jeered at Melissa, twisting the knife further. Meanwhile, in smaller circles around the room, people whispered and pointed. Some muttered that Melissa was to blame, that she had led them both on. Others said it was Daniel, always a troublemaker, desperate for attention. A handful muttered that Jordan's temper proved what they'd always suspected, that it wasn't just between the three of them anymore. The whole reunion had fractured into sides, like old high school cliques being reborn. But I overheard one woman near the buffet say, "I swear, this feels like senior year all over again." Her friend snorted. "Yeah, except now they're adults who should know better." But that was the thing. No one here was acting like an adult. Melissa finally tried to speak, her voice breaking through the noise. "Please, can we stop this? This isn't what we came here for." "No," Jordan barked, his chest still heaving. "This ends tonight. No more lies. No more pretending." Daniel laughed, his voice carrying over the din. "Oh, I couldn't agree more." The room split even sharper then. Not just old grudges, but fresh wounds. Friends were pitted against each other, loyalty tested, reputation shredded. And standing in the middle, I realized something chilling. It didn't matter who was right. This wasn't about truth anymore. This was about survival in a room that wanted blood. And I wasn't sure any of us were going to leave with our dignity intact. The shouting didn't die down. It only grew sharper, heavier, more poisonous. Melissa stood in the eye of the storm. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, lips trembling as voices clashed over her like weapons. Melissa knew what she was doing. Someone barked from Daniel's side. "She's innocent in this. Daniel manipulated her." Another fired back. Every word was like a stone hurled at her. She pressed her palms over her ears, shaking her head as if the noise could be shut out. But the room didn't care. They wanted answers. They wanted her. Finally, her composure cracked. "Stop," she screamed, her voice raw, tearing through the chaos like glass shattering on tile. The entire gym fell silent. Even the drunkest, even the loudest, froze. All eyes turned to her. Melissa stood hunched, her chest rising and falling, fingers digging into the sides of her dress, as though holding herself together by sheer force. I can't do this anymore," she whispered. But the microphone someone had abandoned earlier on the stage carried her words across the hall. Jordan took a step toward her, his fists still clenched. "Melissa, don't." Her voice cracked like a whip, startling him into stillness. "Don't come near me. Not you. Not him." She shot Daniel a glance full of venom and despair all at once. People shifted, uncomfortable. The tension in the air felt electric. Dangerous. Melissa's hands trembled as she pointed at both men. "Do you think this is a game? Do you think I wanted this? I've been carrying this secret, for years. And now you've forced it out in front of everyone." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Daniel's smirk faltered. "What secret?" he said, softer this time, uncertainty creeping in. Melissa let out a bitter laugh that dissolved into a sob. "You don't even know, do you? Neither of you do. You just assumed, fought, claimed me like some prize. While I've been drowning." The room leaned in. Even I held my breath. Her knees buckled, and for a moment I thought she might collapse. But then she steadied herself, clutching the microphone stand like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her voice lowered, trembling but firm. You all think you know the story. You don't. None of you know what really happened. And if you did, you wouldn't be looking at me the same way. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People craned closer, desperate to hear more. And then she said it, the line that would change everything. There's more between us than anyone realizes. More than I ever wanted to admit. And tonight, I can't hide it anymore. Her words dropped like a bomb. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was a fuse burning toward an explosion that I knew then. Whatever came next would tear this night open even wider than the fight. Had Melissa's hands shook as she gripped the microphone, her knuckles white. The entire gym had fallen into a strained hush, as if everyone knew they were about to witness something none of them could unsee. I haven't been honest, she started, her voice wavering but gaining strength with every word. Not just tonight, not just since prom. I've been holding this secret, thinking it would protect everyone. But it didn't, and now it's too late to hide it anymore. Eyes widened, whispers began, and even Jordan and Daniel looked like they were stepping back to brace for impact. She took a deep breath. I knew about Daniel and Jordan, about the fights, the arguments, all the tension building for years. I saw what was happening, the way it was poisoning everyone, but I didn't tell them. Daniel blinked, his smirk faltering. You knew? Melissa nodded, tears streaming freely now. Yes, and I didn't say a word. I tried to handle it silently. I tried to steer us away from disaster. I thought if I just showed love, support, and belief in both of them, maybe it would fix itself. The crowd gasped. Jordan's face went pale. You knew? And did nothing? I did something, Melissa said, her voice stronger, shaking with conviction. I showed them they mattered. I reminded them, in small ways, that they were responsible, capable, worth more than their anger or jealousy. Every smile, every word of encouragement, it was me fighting to save us. And tonight, it's clear that worked, but also failed in ways I couldn't control. Daniel's smug facade cracked completely. So, all this time, you were manipulating us? Melissa shook her head. No, I wasn't manipulating. I was protecting the people I love. And even now, I'm standing here, not to punish or blame, but to stop the chaos before it destroys us all. The tension in the room was almost tangible. Jordan's fists unclenched slightly. Daniel's eyes narrowed, but he was quieter now. I wanted to save us, Melissa continued, voice steadier. To remind both of you, and everyone here, that we are more than the grudges of the past. That love, loyalty, and care can still heal. A few guests nodded slowly. Others whispered among themselves. The fire of gossip had been doused just slightly by the sheer honesty of her words, and I realized, standing there, that Melissa's confession didn't just reveal a secret. It shifted the entire battlefield. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, there was a chance for reconciliation, if Daniel and Jordan could truly see her intent. Rather than just their own pride, that Melissa's eyes met ours, unflinching. I won't let this night define us. Not the fights, not the gossip, not the mistakes. We can choose something better, if we're willing. And for a moment, it felt like the room held its breath, waiting to see if we would. The silence after Melissa's confession wasn't just calm, it was heavy, expectant. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, unsure of what to do next. That I watched Jordan shift uncomfortably, his posture softening slightly. The edge in his eyes was still there, but it was no longer aimed at Melissa. It was directed inward, at the pride and anger he'd carried for years. Melissa stepped toward him cautiously, one hand extended, trembling ever so slightly. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. Not ever. And I hope, in time, you can see that. Jordan hesitated, then slowly took her hand, just barely touching her fingers. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. A crack in the wall he'd built around himself. Daniel, surprisingly quiet now, leaned against the bar, his smugness replaced with something heavier, contemplation. For the first time, he seemed to understand the weight of her words. He cleared his throat, softer than I'd ever heard him. I didn't realize. You were trying to hold us together. I thought. He paused, running a hand through his hair. I was wrong. Melissa gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was acknowledgement, Not forgiveness, but a start. Small gestures started to ripple through the room. Jordan offered to help clean up the spilled drinks. Daniel, hesitantly, helped him. Melissa's voice grew steadier, offering reassurance, gratitude, and encouragement, quietly reminding each of them of their value beyond anger or old grudges. I saw it in the smallest details. Jordan letting Melissa take the lead in conversation, listening more than speaking. Daniel pausing before making a joke, realizing it might wound someone unintentionally. Melissa smiling softly at both. Small gestures of care, a hand on a shoulder, a gentle nod. Words that reminded them of who they were when they were at their best. It wasn't magic. The tension didn't vanish instantly, but it softened, stretched, and for the first time, genuine trust, or at least the beginnings of it, started to creep back. By the end of the night, laughter wasn't forced. Words weren't sharpened into weapons. Melissa's quiet guidance, her consistent small actions of love and care, were working. Slowly, the fractures that had threatened to ruin everyone were beginning to mend. And for the first time in over a decade, it felt like the possibility of normalcy, of real friendship and understanding, might actually exist. The days after the reunion were quiet, almost unnervingly so. But quiet doesn't mean calm. Small tensions, tiny sparks of old patterns, began to surface almost immediately. Jordan and Daniel had returned to their usual routines. Yet every glance, every word carried the weight of Melissa's confession. Jordan found himself thinking twice before snapping at minor annoyances. Daniel, for all his bravado, hesitated when his instinct was to provoke. Melissa watched both carefully, but now not from a place of fear or pressure, from patience and care. She would make small gestures, leaving a note of encouragement on Jordan's desk, reminding him of his strength, cooking a favorite snack for Daniel, silently signaling she trusted him to make the right choice, saying simple, heartfelt words, "I believe in you," or "You can handle this," when either of them faced a difficult decision. These small things were tests of trust, not by design, but by circumstance. One evening, Jordan received an upsetting email from work. Old instincts flared, anger, defensiveness, wanting to lash out. But he caught himself, paused, and remembered Melissa's words, her consistent faith in him. He responded calmly, professionally, and then told Melissa later, "I don't know if I would have done that without you." Daniel, too, faced temptation. A group from his old friend circle invited him to stir trouble, old pranks, snide comments, gossip. Normally, he would have jumped in headfirst. But remembering Melissa's quiet guidance, he hesitated, then politely declined. He even told Melissa afterward, almost shyly, "I didn't want to disappoint you." Melissa's presence wasn't controlling or demanding. It was steady, gentle, consistent. Every gesture, every word, every look reminded them that the world outside their past wasn't worth destroying what they had now. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Conflicts that would have escalated into chaos before now resolved with conversation. Anger was met with patience, jealousy with reassurance, temptation with reflection. It was delicate, fragile, like walking a tightrope after years of free falling. But each success, no matter how small, reinforced the new balance. They were learning, painfully but deliberately, how to trust again, themselves, each other, and Melissa's unwavering belief in both of them. For the first time, I realized healing isn't about grand gestures. It's about tiny, consistent choices that gradually reshape a fractured world into something whole. Months had passed since that chaotic reunion. Slowly, painfully, the fractures between Jordan, Daniel, and Melissa had begun to heal. Melissa's quiet, consistent support had reshaped the dynamics entirely. Jordan had learned to pause before anger took over. Daniel had begun to respect boundaries he once ignored. And Melissa, she had become the anchor they didn't realize they needed. The three of them sat together one evening in Melissa's small apartment, laughter spilling over the table as they reminisced about their school days, not with bitterness, but with a gentle, reflective humor. Jordan raised his glass. "Two second chances," he said, voice steady. Daniel grinned, nodding. "And to the woman who kept us from destroying ourselves." Melissa smiled softly, warmth radiating from her. "I never gave up on you too," she said simply. "I believe we could do better. And look, we are. It wasn't perfect. There were scars, still faint reminders of the past. But now, instead of festering, they were markers of survival, proof of lessons learned. The balance had been tested, fragile yet resilient, and they had emerged stronger together. Spring arrived, bringing a sense of renewal. The reunion drama was long behind them. Bonds, once strained to breaking, had been reforged. Melissa, Jordan, and Daniel each moved forward in their lives with a deeper understanding of themselves and one another. Old grudges no longer dictated their choices. They had learned to communicate, to trust, and to value the presence of love and care in small, deliberate ways. Melissa reflected one evening, watching the city lights from her apartment window, and realized that her belief in people, in forgiveness, in resilience, had truly shaped the outcome. Her quiet efforts, the gestures of love and encouragement, had not only prevented disaster, but had given everyone a chance at redemption. Jordan placed a hand over hers, smiling gently. "We made it," he said. "Yes," Melissa replied, "and we'll keep making it. Together." It wasn't a perfect world, but it was theirs, a world where mistakes could be acknowledged, lessons could be learned, and trust could be rebuilt. And for the first time in years, they felt not just relief, but hope.